Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight in our third virtual member meeting tonight on safe workplaces. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are holding this meeting across New South Wales on Indigenous land, and I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Andrew Holland. I'm the Executive Director of ASMOF New South Wales. The meeting was meant to commence with our Vice President, Chung Soo Yong. Unfortunately, he's on call tonight. So he's in the meeting, but he's actually, as we had expected would probably occur, he got the phone call. So when he comes back on, I might hand over to him. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to look at a number of issues that are impacting on you, our members. And before we jump into the discussion about safe workplaces, we want to give you a quick update about the attempt by the government to freeze the pay increase, a short update about the current situation of the personal protective equipment in light of COVID-19, and then we will move then on to introducing our special guest speakers tonight. And those special guest speakers are two guest speakers who are experts in the area of the safe workplaces, and they're going to shed some light tonight on some particular issues that we hope will frame how we as a union can move forward over the next 6 to 12 months in ensuring that when we move beyond the pandemic and within the pandemic itself, how do we ensure that workplaces for our members and for the patients that you serve are safe? And I will, the process, the form that the meeting will take is we'll have the guest presenters talk, and then we're going to break you up into separate breakout rooms to allow for a facilitated conversation about what you see as the priorities that we should be pursuing as a union. That breakout room, the breakout room session will last for 10 minutes. And then after that, we'll reconvene in the main meeting. We are going to ask one person or one member from each of those rooms to give a very short 1 to 2 minute update on what the agreed priorities are coming out of the session, out of the breakout session. What I want to do now is just give you a brief update on the current situation with the pay freeze. I'm sure you've all followed not just our updates, but the updates in the media. As you are well aware, the New South Wales government has proposed to freeze the 2.5% increase that is due to all public sector workers in New South Wales. This has been the standard increase that's occurred for the last 9 years. The argument that has been put is an argument that we believe fails a basic economic test, and there is some good evidence out there which shows that far from encouraging or being a stimulus to economic growth in the recovery, by removing the 2.5% pay increase for 400,000 public sector workers, it is in fact going to be a dampener on demand, and if anything, have a negative impact on the potential for a quick or better economic recovery. You may have seen that an attempt to push this through Parliament was voted down by a joint Labor, Greens and crossbench decision to not let it through Parliament. So where we are now is that we have our applications in the Industrial Relations Commission, as do most other public sector unions to increase the salaries and allowances in the awards. And we've got dates set for hearing over the next 2 weeks, and we'll keep members up to date on what occurs there. The second issue I wanted to update members on was, and I should mention, and you'll see on your screen now, that the coordinated by unions in New South Wales, we are asking people to sign a petition, which is on the screen. It's also on our website, and we'll continually remind members of this. Sign a petition which will go to the Premier to keep the pressure on to say that cutting the pay increase is a bad thing economically. We also believe it's a bad thing morally. A quick update on the PPE issue. And for those of you who attended our last virtual meeting, there was a good discussion about the issues we were pursuing in relation to PPE. Myself and the President, Dr. Sarah, have been having originally daily meetings with the Deputy Secretary regarding PPE and other issues arising out of COVID-19. They've fallen back now. We're only doing them twice a week. We have got assurances from New South Wales Health that they have the PPE supply issue under control. Unless we get feedback from members that this is not the case, then we can only assume that they are providing us with accurate information. I say that because I just want to encourage members that if in your workplaces you are experiencing issues with either the supply of PPE, the quality of the PPE, or the processes around fit testing, for instance, of masks, you do need to continually let us know. The quickest and most effective way of letting us know is through our allocation@asmof.org.au email. And we will raise those issues with the ministry if members say there are problems. And to give them their credit, that when we have raised issues, they have been relatively quick in seeking to resolve the issues as they arise. So they're the two updates I wanted to touch on for members before we move now to the discussion on safe workplaces. For us, the issue of safe workplaces has been an ongoing issue through our campaign over the last year and a half on open plan workplaces. I think it's not disingenuous to say we have had serious concerns about the impact of moving toward open plan or activity-based working and the quality of work that can be delivered by our members. And it's an ongoing campaign. What the pandemic has done has brought in to stark contrast those arguments about how workplace design can impact upon not just the morale and productivity, but on the actual work health and safety of our members. Some of you may have recently seen reported in the Financial Review and other media, the comments that were made by the person who first introduced the concept of activity-based working in Australia, comparing open plan workplaces to cruise ships, with a stark warning that they believe open plan, hot desking, need to be gotten rid of as a result of COVID-19. But we believe that is just one part of the equation. We want to get your ideas tonight about other options open to us to pursue to ensure that there are safe workplaces, including options for you to implement working from home if that exists, or telehealth. Looking at how we utilise the work health and safety provisions, and both our two special guest speakers will touch on those issues. So what I might do before I introduce our special guest speakers is just give a quick opportunity for any members who might have any questions about any of the issues we've raised so far to either put them in the chat or to raise your hand or to unmute yourself and we can take a verbal question. And if we don't get any, I'll hand it over to our first guest speaker. I might take that as a trigger, as a cue to hand it over. So our first guest speaker is Carly Stebbing, who's the founder and principal of Resolution 123. Carly's going to talk tonight about the importance of having, among other things, having businesses having proper plans in place which ensure that there is during the pandemic, but also post-pandemic, proper workplace plans to ensure that we don't put our members and workers generally at risk moving into or attempting to move back to business as usual. So thank you, Carly. I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, great. So it's a very little brief snapshot of a larger live that I did. So if it's interesting to people, you can head over to our Facebook page to get the bigger portion. We're going to put my timer on so I don't hold up anyone else and see what we can get through in 10 minutes. So what we know about the current guidelines are that we are all meant to continue to work from home if that is working for your employer and for you. Okay, so that's the first and an important starting point. If, for example, you are currently using telehealth or it's working for you to be at home, there shouldn't be a compelling reason for you to be back in the workplace right now. The next thing is that if there is any requirement to return back to work, your employer is required to have a COVID safe plan in place. I'm going to come back to that in some detail. The next is that we know that New South Wales Transport wants us to avoid public transport during peak hour. In fact, the guidelines, when I looked at them about a week ago, were that they already didn't want anyone else on public transport during the peak hour period. So if there is to be a transition back into the workplace, your ability to get there needs to be considered having regard to those guidelines around avoiding public transport during that time, and also the utility in transitioning back to work if that is the case. I saw a ridiculous piece recently on, might have been on the 7:30 report, but they were talking about how long it was taking someone in Melbourne to get to the office because they were hopping on and off trams depending on how full they were or how many people came on board, and a trip that would normally take 20 minutes was taking an hour. So that's something that we need to be thinking about. And the next is that, social distancing and this 4 square metre rule is here to stay with us for a really long time. Experts are saying that it's, at least it's probably 12 months, if not longer. And so that's really relevant to this concept around the open plan office and how we work with that. I want to get into a little bit more around this COVID safe plan, what it means, and then how it interacts with your work health safety rights under the relevant legislation. We know that the National COVID-19 Coordination Commission has put together this template that employers should be working through at a bare minimum to ensure that they have a COVID safe plan in place. Now, in effect, it's just a really great checklist that goes through the resources that are available on Safe Work Australia's website that are all publicly available and really, really helpful for employees to get access to, especially because you can drill down into the industry that you're operating in and get an understanding of what's relevant for you in particular. Critically, the plan takes an employer through 3 stages in order to prepare to return workers to the workplace and ensure that they have a COVID safe plan in place. The first, critically, is that they undertake a risk assessment, and that requires consultation with workers. Okay, so something that we've been saying to our clients and in the live that we did is that if your employer is asking you to come back to work, your first question should be, okay, what's our COVID safe plan? I'd like to give that some consideration before I attend the workplace. And how did they come to get to a COVID safe plan if you haven't been consulted about it? The only way that could properly have been ascertained is if your health safety representative has been consulted, or if a health and safety committee in the workplace has been consulted in the process of undertaking a risk assessment about the safety of a return to work, okay? And so your follow-up questions might be, who is my health and safety representative, and who is the health and safety committee, and how do I get involved in that if you've got concerns? It also is an ability then to contact the relevant people that you need to have those discussions with, okay? But importantly, the first step to having a COVID safe workplace plan in place is that there is a risk assessment. You can't properly do a risk assessment without consulting workers. So that's the first and foremost thing to note. The second part of the plan is preparing and preventing COVID-19, and that's all about good hygiene and social distancing. The business COVID safe plan that's been published by the Commission includes checklists for cleaning and health and hygiene. They're generic, and again, you need more industry specific things, and probably I don't think anyone on here really needs to be given a checklist on those matters. You can probably speak to them yourselves with your employer. And the third part of the plan is understanding how an employer is going to respond to a case of COVID-19 in the workplace. Again, it references a Safe Work Australia checklist. I can share the link to this document if the union doesn't already have it, and to share with their members, because I think it's important, because it it's a great guide for you to go to and check on a number of things. If you're concerned that you've been exposed to someone with COVID-19 in the workplace, or if you are in fact diagnosed with COVID-19, it goes through the steps that are required of an employer to ensure that they're responding appropriately. And so that includes things like isolating the risk, seeking advice, transport, cleaning, identifying and informing and reviewing procedures again. Work health and safety is very much a continuous improvement model. So, this idea that it starts with a risk assessment, almost starts with a risk assessment and ends in a risk assessment as well, and continues around like that. So that's a little bit about the COVID Safe Plan in a nutshell. An expanded version is available over on our Facebook page. But really importantly, in respect of your work health and safety rights, it's important for you to understand you have a right to elect a health safety representative. I would hope in most of your workplaces you have one, and they may well be your delegate. You have the right to request the formation of a health and safety committee in your workplace, and to know who that is. It's important, because if you have a genuine safety concern arising out of COVID-19 or otherwise, you want to know who it is you should appropriately go to raise that concern. You have a right to cease unsafe work, okay? And that would include where you have a reasonable concern of exposure to COVID-19 in the workplace. And that includes a requirement for you to perform alternative safe duties where you have that concern. And that would probably include performing your duties from home where that's possible. And that again circles back to this first position, which is at the moment we should continue to work from home if we can, and that's working for everybody. You have a right to have your health and safety concerns resolved within an agreed procedure, and you have a right to understand what that procedure is and where you can access it. And you have a right not to be discriminated against because you have raised a health and safety concern. I think, Andrew, I'm just towards the end of my time, and I feel like I've kind of, in a nutshell there, the points that I wanted to hit on. So.
Thank you very much. And we do have some questions, which before we move over to Liam, I might look at putting some of these questions. What I'll make clear is that some of the questions we'll try and address, we might be able to address straight away, and I'll put to both of our special guest speakers. Some questions that I may be able to ask because they're directly about the position of ASMOF generally on specific issues. Others, and there may be an overlap here between all three, I think the answers are going to really be answers that we need to flesh out amongst either within the breakout groups or following on from tonight's meeting. So the first question is from Marion. And it's a really important question, which I think was quite specific, I think can be translated across probably the entire membership. And I will put this to Carly and Liam in a general sense, because you may not know the specifics of the requirements. The question is, guidelines for radiology reporting rooms, should it be one person per 4 square meters? So there is a specific element to that about the radiology reporting rooms, but it's really about the way I would see what process, Carly and Liam, should members like Marion follow to try and reach some kind of procedure with management to ensure there are proper social distancing measures in place in these reporting rooms or elsewhere within hospitals. Carly, do you want to have a stab at that first?
Sure. I can't speak to whether there's a specific guideline on this, but my starting point would be the requirements for social distancing and the 4 square meter rule apply in general. You'd need to go to Safe. So my starting point would be I'd be going to Safe Work Australia's website to determine whether there's some exemption for this specific industry or practice. If there isn't, then that's what applies. Moving beyond that, I would be talking to your health and safety representative or your union delegate around any concerns that you have about the failure of the employer to adopt an appropriate social distancing and 4 square meter rule, and to have that resolved with them. Again, I would also be asking them about, putting it to them, I have some concerns that the social distancing and the 4 square meter rule is not being applied. Can you explain to me why that isn't the case, and what is your COVID safe plan? I just think if you can just adopt that language, it's going to become really important. So when you've got these concerns, you say, I've got a concern about this. How does our COVID safe plan relate to this? What is the COVID safe plan in relation to this?
Thank you, Carly. Liam, did you want to add any comments on that?
Yeah, and I would sort of cover this off a little bit in my discussion, but I think it's a really good question. It's something that we are getting constantly, not just obviously about radiology, but plenty of workers that are required by their employment to be in close proximity to others. And the way I sort of describe the situation we've got is that our work health and safety laws were never designed for a pandemic, and they are woefully inadequate when it comes to addressing this problem. Essentially, what our work health and safety laws do is, within the Act, they provide a general duty for employers to ensure health and safety so far as is reasonably practicable. Now, in many circumstances, physical distancing is practical. I think intuitively about the situation that's described, and that there should be ways in which, through engineering controls or other methods, you can minimise someone's exposure to another in that sort of environment. So again, if we're going back to the sort of legal rights about how workers would agitate around these sorts of issues, it would come back to how can we practically apply physical distancing in this setting? What are the organisational adjustments that need to occur, and are they reasonably practicable? And to the point that was raised about how long we're potentially going to be living with this as a hazard, we've now seen workplaces that have literally been completely re-engineered and redesigned to ensure physical distancing. So I would have thought in a setting like this is a good example where we can say, if we're going to do this sustainably for the long term, we really need to think about how we can deal with the 1 person for every 4 square meters. I would say also, in terms of how long we'll have 1 for every 4 square meters, we are starting to hear that some states, Western Australia most recently, is now moving to a 1 for 2 square meters. So there is this chance that it might flux a little bit, but there's no doubt that physical distancing is going to be a key feature going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. There's several questions here around the key issue of office accommodation. And there's a question or a question/comment from Karuna from Campbelltown, who I know has been quite active in for the union and for the members in the Campbelltown redevelopment. And the question really is what is our approach now on office accommodation in hospital redevelopments, and how do we, how are we going to, will we change our stance? How will we approach the ministry and LHDs in light of COVID-19? And I think I'll respond in two ways. The first one is what COVID-19 has done, I think, is just brought into stark contrast the arguments that we had previously run in our campaign and in Industrial Relations Commission. What it does, I think, and it's built on what Carly and Liam just said, is that it gives us greater ammunition when we engage the members and we force the employers to properly consult, because that is where our key power lies, in making them properly consult. And if they don't, then we need to look at the actions we need to take. And we've just got this added element now, which may not have previously existed, which is the health and safety issue that has evolved from the pandemic. Karina also made a really valuable comment that there is no health and safety rep at Campbelltown, and thank you. And I wouldn't mind other people from other LHDs and hospitals letting me know if there is a health and safety rep at your site, because if not, and I won't steal Liam's thunder because I know he'll be touching on this, this is such a wonderful opportunity for us to engage with our members and get you involved in as health and safety reps. There's another comment from a member at Western Sydney along, basically highlighting that in the way management has often engaged in this issue of office accommodation is really to just not listen to the views of the members. And we know that. And I think that's really important to bring that conversation into these breakout rooms, and that we actually get your support to continue pushing these issues, because again, as Carly said, this escalates the obligation, the legal obligation on management to make sure they are properly consulting. I think they're the questions we've had so far. I'll just double check. What I might do is hand it over to Liam O'Brien. Now, Liam O'Brien is the ACTU Assistant Secretary, and Liam is going to talk to you about the ACTU Safe Workplaces campaign, and I think you'll have a little presentation as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Wonderful, Liam.
I'm going to run through a few slides and try and keep it to 10 minutes because Carly set such a good precedent, and I'm a union official.
She did.
Abstract thing for me. So I apologise in advance. So look, firstly, thank you, Andrew, and to ASMOF for the opportunity. And in particular, thank you to all of you who have sort of gotten us through, along with so many other healthcare workers and essential workers, through this pandemic. I think on behalf of the movement, we are extremely fortunate to have such great people that have been able to support and protect the community through what is clearly an unprecedented event. I said before that our work health and safety laws were never designed for a pandemic. And I think the best way to describe it, and it really builds off what Carly talked about, is that there are these public health measures that talk about physical distancing that have essentially closed certain businesses. And we have our work health and safety laws that operate across that. And there's a lot of places where they intersect. And actually there's some really big gaps where I think we have been reliant upon public health measures, but actually the underlying sort of regulatory framework that workers rely upon to essentially make their work healthy and safe is not actually adequate. The best way I describe the public health measures is they are excellent, and they have definitely kept us safe. And in places like New South Wales and Victoria and Queensland, where we've seen, significantly more stringent public health measures, these are public health measures that have largely been focused at businesses and workplaces that invite the public in. And they are really there to protect the public and, yes, the people that work in those workplaces. I can say that throughout this pandemic, there have been thousands of workplaces that don't invite the public in, that have not been practicing safe workplaces, that have not been applying physical distancing, including where they can. And indeed, there are lots of, really unsafe practices that actually, but for a lot of luck and the good work of people like you and our ability to quickly contain the virus here, we have avoided what really would have been a tragedy taking off in many of these workplaces. And I'm going to go to some of the insights there. But essentially, our campaign, our political campaign, is built around three really key issues. It is about a real problem we've got in our work health and safety laws, and it goes to what I'm going to talk about, which I think at least in the healthcare profession, you understand some of these principles around hierarchy of control and the idea that we're going to have the most effective controls in our workplace that will protect us from exposure to COVID, how our work health and safety regulators should be responding to COVID as an issue and some of the problems we've got in our work health and safety laws there. And then thirdly, which is a really big issue in Australia around insecure work and the fact that 1 in 3 workers has no access to sick leave, the idea that we need to have some sort of universal sick leave that supports the idea that if anyone is sick, they should stay home. So I'm going to run very briefly through a couple of slides. I'm not going to go through all of them just because it is quite lengthy and we'll be here for a while. So I just want to run you through some quick research that we conducted. I'm hoping everybody can see this here around. And excuse me, I'm just going to take you through this survey. So we surveyed over 1,500 workers about a fortnight ago, asking them about what their experience was in relation to workplace health and safety, specifically to COVID. And we asked a series of questions, both of people that were working in workplaces, so those are the orange bars or the darker orange bars, and those that were working from home. And in the case of people working from home, we're asking both about how they were being treated in their home, but indeed what they understood to be happening in their workplace should they be returning soon. And as I said, this was about discussions, so what they were aware of and what their employer was discussing with them, and actions that their employer was taking. And what I've got here is really a few of the key issues that have been discussed with workers about the core concerns and controls that have got in place. So as you can see, really when it comes to many of the issues that we know sort of relate to COVID, and I've got mental health there as well, and we know there are significant mental health issues, in particular in how work is organised, both for workers in workplaces and for those remotely. There are very little discussions happening in most workplaces regarding any of this. So, support for mental health is barely recognisable in terms of anything. Providing pandemic leave or some sense of universal sick leave for all workers, again, very, very low. Most workers report no additional cleaning and disinfecting. Now, they may have had adequate cleaning and disinfecting, but we think that's probably unlikely. Equally, very low levels of any attention around personal hygiene measures, access to soap and water and hand sanitisers. But also, and we talked before about options for working remotely, really, 1 in 3 workers who are working from home had that opportunity really clearly put to them as there was going to be continued options for working from home, whereas most were not. And again, for those that were in workplaces, really only 5% had any evidence of any discussions about opportunities for working from home. Social distancing or physical distancing is the one standout that has got some level of uptake, both in terms of discussions and, as you'll see on the next slide, in terms of actions. And as you see, in terms of actions, again, very little evidence of many of these things being undertaken. The key other concerns that workers have got really relate to a few really topical ones. As I said before, the idea that workers who would get sick and have to isolate, not having access to paid leave, that's a really significant issue for a lot of workers. Equally, workers who are concerned about how they would get to and from work and how their commute would potentially expose them to COVID-19, and a general concern both around health and safety and the risk of a second wave, but also whether all appropriate safety measures were being put in place in their workplace. So this was taken 2 weeks ago, again, as sort of we saw the public health measures starting to be relaxed, a real level of anxiety around what was happening in their workplaces. I mentioned before about sick leave, and this sort of really, I think, underscores the problem that we've got. Is despite all the public messaging around stay at home if you're sick, we still have 1 in 10 workers who will go to work while symptomatic with symptoms analogous to COVID-19. That number increases the lower the income of the worker, and that's not surprising. Lower income worker, more likely to be in insecure employment, whether it be casual labour, hire or contractor, and therefore more likely to be having to force into a situation where they're forced to have to choose between can they meet their financial needs versus should they stay at home. So on that basis, and I'll just kill this screen. On that basis, we launched a campaign essentially calling for these 3 key measures, because as Carly sort of went to, our health and safety laws provide a general duty on employers to ensure health and safety so far as is reasonably practicable. What then normally happens with key hazards is we have what's called regulations that specifically prescribe to employers about how they should manage a particular hazard, and at is very high level. And that's then thirdly supported by codes of practice, which are generally either providing practical guidance or industry-based guidance about how duty holders, employers, can meet their duties in terms of providing safe work. We have been calling for a regulation in relation to COVID because we do know that there are known controls that are effective. We obviously have no vaccines, so we cannot eliminate the hazard, but there are more effective controls and less effective controls. For those that are familiar with the hierarchy of control, controls such as working from home, where you can keep people removed and isolated from the hazard, is far better than low order controls where we're educating workers on hand hygiene and respiratory hygiene or issuing hand sanitizer. And what we've been calling for, and what we were really concerned and is borne out in that research, is in particular early on in this pandemic, we saw lots of workplaces that were putting up posters about hand and respiratory hygiene, but not enough effort was being paid towards physical distancing, towards working from home, and really making sure that those were the measures that were in place. In addition to those sort of 3 key political campaigns, last week, which Andrew was alluding to, we launched a COVID Aware campaign, which is a general campaign for the whole community, not focused at a particular industry, about making sure that workers are COVID aware and taking them through what those key hazards are. And I'm just going to quickly share a screen that sort of takes you through what that looks like. And we launched a website here where you can essentially go through, on the left here, you go through a checklist. It asks you roughly 20 questions. It gives you the ability to input details around what's happening in your workplace regarding support for workers who might be exposed to COVID, such as providing paid leave. It asks questions around physical distancing, and if you can practice physical distancing. If you can't practice physical distancing, what other controls is the employer putting in place, like, for example, Perspex screens, minimising meetings, things like that. It talks about the mental health issues associated with it, but it also then goes to a whole heap of questions regarding consultation with workers and workers' rights. And I think it was important that Andrew started to allude to this in the latter part, is that workplaces that have established health and safety structures, like elected representatives who are trained by their union or trained by Unions New South Wales in how to exercise their rights, who have health and safety committees who are actively consulted about COVID-19, because as Carly alluded to, it is a dynamic hazard. It is something that is not, it is not just sort of set and forget. Each setting will change, and indeed as the pandemic progresses, the risks will change as well. So this is a checklist that is generic. We've been encouraging unions to adapt the hard copy checklist, which ASMOF can access, and tailor that for your own setting. It also then provides union members the ability to download a kit, which again gives more detail around things like physical distancing, support for workers, mental health, and a whole range of other tools. So we encourage people to use it. As I said, it's been out there for about a week, and we've had a really good uptake, and the campaign's sort of kicking on. In terms of updates, in terms of the 3 political asks, obviously the government's made it clear that they're not for really introducing a universal sick leave scheme. We are aware that there might be some jurisdictions, some states that will look to providing support in particular for casual workers who don't have sick leave, because it is a real risk that everyone is very conscious of in terms of workers showing up to work sick. In relation to the two health and safety issues, New South Wales actually does require all employers who have a COVID-19 that arises out of work to notify WorkSafe. But that's coming under a bit of scrutiny at the moment, and there is currently a case before the New South Wales Industrial Relations Commission because Qantas sought to appeal an infringement notice that was placed upon them because they had 50 flight attendants who contracted COVID, for which they did not notify WorkSafe. They profess to this day that there is no way those flight attendants caught it as arising out of their work, despite the fact that workers' compensation claims have been approved for nearly all of them, and the fact that they all got it on a flight. That is an ongoing issue. In relation to improved regulation, we are hopeful that we will get some improvement. It may be in the form of a code, but needless to say, it will be an improvement on what we've got, which is really from an enforceable sort of instrument. You know, we have the guidance, and the guidance that's being produced by Safe Work Australia is helpful, and we're obviously consulted as part of the social partners on that guidance, but it does lack the enforceability of what a code or indeed a regulation, which is really what we should be trying to get in place in relation to COVID. You know, a code will be an improvement, but you know, a regulation will be much better and give health and safety reps a lot more teeth that they can get change affected in their workplaces. So I might leave it with that, Andrew, because I'm sure I have breached the 10 minutes, and we'll take questions if we've got time.
Thanks, Liam. Are there any questions of Liam? Either you can put it in the chat, or feel free, if you're on video, to raise your hand if you want to ask a question directly of Liam.
I can see some. I'm happy to have a crack at the ones that I can see in the
I
chat.
think the ones that have been in the chat have been we've put, and so far, unless I'm missing some, and also what I've suggested to a couple of people who've raised the questions, re-raise them in the breakout room, because I think that's going to be the important vehicle to guide the discussion of where to next. Look, if there are no specific questions now, and some more may come out of the discussion that occurs in the breakout room, and I've just seen a new message. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Liam, for putting that link up. Wonderful. What we'll do now is we're going to go into the breakout rooms. You've each been allocated. You don't need to do anything. You'll just automatically be put into a breakout room, and there will be a person or possibly two people there to help facilitate the discussion. The purpose or the aim of the breakout session is we want you to try and identify two main priorities that we the union, we being you, the members, and us, the employees of the union, two main priorities that we need to focus on over the next 12 months to ensure that your workplaces are safe, secure, and appropriate for you and the patients. And what I want you to do is reflect on the comments that both Carly and Liam have raised, but also reflect on any issues that you've been engaged with over the last 12 months, in particular of those of you here tonight who have been involved in our office accommodation campaign and have been involved locally in an office accommodation issue. You have 10 minutes for the discussion. The facilitator will then ask for one of you to nominate to report back to give a very short update on what those two priorities should be. We will then take those on board and obviously use them to progress a campaign from today. And tonight's really the start of this process. So what I will ask our admin to do now is to put everyone into the breakout rooms, and I will see you back in